If you're over 50 and your knees hurt when you run, you've probably been told it's just arthritis and that you should slow down or stop. But I recently helped a runner in her 60s eliminate her knee pain without surgery, even with arthritis. And in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how she did it so you can run for life. So why so many runners, keep getting hurt, they keep getting injured, they're not able to enjoy the sport for life. See, runners typically tend to just push through the pain, they ignore it, they just think it's just a normal part of training, and they only seek help when it gets the injury becomes like full blown, right? Where they're like limping, they realize they can't finish a run workout without excruciating pain. They typically they're building up for like a race, maybe they have a spring marathon or a fall marathon, and then the injury really flares up. They end up going to the doctors. They come to me. I'm a physical therapist. Like, Ray, you got to help. I have this pain. This race is coming up in like 2 weeks. Like by then, the pain is so full gone. They're going to have to either completely walk the race or not finish the race because of the injury so bad because they just waited too long or they were reactive, right? They just reacted because the pain got so bad instead of being proactive, recognizing the warning signs and doing steps before it even blows up on them, right? If you're proactive, oftentimes you could prevent a lot of these injuries from happening in the first place. So that's the biggest mindset shift is like, stop being reactive, be proactive. Many runners also follow these generic training plans, whether their favorite coaches or their friends said, hey, follow so-and-so's plan. It worked for me. Right, but oftentimes these plans don't take into account your individual like fitness level, your injury history. Right, it typically ignores recovery capacity. A lot of these marathon training plans have runners running 5, 6 days a week. Some even have you running 7 days a week. Right. So it doesn't take into account your individual capacity, load tolerance. And then many of these runners following these training plans, typically it's when runners who are training for marathons who end up getting hurt. Now, you could get hurt training for a half marathon, you could get hurt training for a 5K, but I see most folks getting injured just because of the higher volume when they're training for the marathon, and oftentimes it's a lack of recovery, and they're getting common overuse injuries like the runner's knee, IT band pain, shin splints, Achilles tendonitis, plantar fasciitis. And these are just overuse injuries from, doing too much too soon, too fast, right? They're typically trying to chase high mileage. They're obsessed with the mileage because they think, oh, that's the only way to train for the marathon. I have to run 40 miles a week, 60 miles a week, 70 miles a week, 90 miles a week, right? Because that's what the elites do, or that's what their favorite coach recommended. The thing is, there's different ways to train. And if you're ignoring your body's recovery levels, you're putting too much strain on your body that it's not able to recover from, and that's where you get a lot of these overuse injuries. And a lot of times runners obsess over the wrong things. They obsess over the shoes. Like, well, I just got to get the latest shoes, man. I got to get the latest race shoes, or I got to get the gear, the different watches and clothing, and I have to get the latest gels. I have to get all the electrolyte powders and all that, while ignoring the things that do actually matter: sleep, strength, mobility training, and many of these runners, they'll treat it like a casual hobby instead of a sport that requires full body preparation, right? They kind of just rush the process. Like, okay, cool. I'm excited. My friend's doing this marathon. I'm just going to jump right into marathon training without even having run a half marathon prior. Unfortunately, there are many people who are like this, where they just jump right to marathon plan training, skip the steps, and they end up getting hurt, right? And not to say they can't complete the race, but they're like limping across the finish line, right? And then they like give up on running altogether. They get discouraged, like, oh, it's just a painful sport. It doesn't have to be that way. There's different studies out there and different figures, but I'm just going to share here in New York Times as an article where they mentioned 9 out of 10 runners have to sit out of training every year due to injury. And in this systematic review, actual research study here, the numbers right, but about 50% of runners get injured every year. I've also seen figures where it's like 80% of runners get injured every year. As a physical therapist, I've seen most of my athletes who end up getting hurt are actual runners. Do I see athletes from other sports, like people who are into lifting or martial arts? Sure. But most of the athletes who actually end up getting hurt, who I see just in physical therapy, I'm in New York City, oftentimes runners, folks who are, adult runners who get into the sport at a later age, and they get into running, and then they end up getting hurt. They jump into marathon training plans when a lot of these injuries could be prevented. But again, many folks just focus on running and ignore everything else outside of running that leads to longevity. And if you want a copy of this Google Doc and to learn more about running pain-free for life, I'm sharing in my free online run group. Click the link in the description to join. So, how I reframed and fixed the root causes. So, I shifted the mindset, right? Treat running like a sport and adopt that athlete's mindset, athlete approach, right? Doesn't mean you have to be a competitive athlete. Doesn't mean you have to be, trying to qualify for the Olympics, or you have to run Boston Marathon. You have to have a sub 3 hour, sub 2:30 hour marathon. No, it just means being smart about your training, right? Taking into account recovery, take recovery serious, the strength, nutrition, right? Be overall healthy, right? Reduce the frequency to just 3 runs per week with true recovery days. So many people run like 6 days a week and they're like, oh, I'm doing recovery runs. But are you really recovering if your body still feels beat up, your legs feel sore, your knees are achy on these recovery runs? It's actually better if you take out the recovery runs and swap them out for cross training days and just only have 3 runs per week. And implemented well-rounded strength training. So, so many runners either don't do any strength training at all, and those who do often only do one type, where they're just working on endurance. They're like, oh, I'm just going to do high repetition, low weight, right? That has its time and place for sure. But if that's the only type of strength training you're doing, you're still neglecting other attributes of strength, like maximal strength, speed strength, explosive strength. So not just focus on endurance, right? Do heavy lifting, do explosive lifting, right? These things make you a more well-rounded athlete, just a more healthier, stronger human being, which will make you stronger to tolerate the loading demands of running, because running could be 2 to 3 times body weight every time your foot hits the ground. So you want to make your body strong enough to handle that impact loading, that impact stress. And make sure you're consistent, right? If you're not consistent with any of these things, if you do it 1 week, then you skip like 3 weeks, that doesn't count. You have to be consistent week after week. Let's prioritize sleep and recovery. Make sure you're actually getting enough sleep. So many people think, oh, I'm just going to be sleep deprived. It's normal. I'm working a full-time job. I'm trying to train for a marathon. I don't have time for sleep. But then if you don't make time for sleep, you're just going to be sleep deprived. You're getting these injuries. Actually, being sleep deprived increases your risk of injury. So make sure you're prioritizing sleep. Do mobility work. A lot of times runners ignore the indicator lights of potential injury, usually stiffness in the joint, maybe your knees getting stiff, ankles getting stiff. And then by ignoring that, then it starts to compound. Then the stress builds, and then it becomes an injury. It becomes painful. If you start doing mobility work, you oftentimes can help the tissue stay mobile, prevent it from becoming a full-blown injury in the future just by doing daily mobility work on your tight or stiff areas. And make sure you structure recovery days and even recovery weeks. Sometimes you have to deload, take a deload week during your training blocks, right? So many people just keep trying to ramp up in a linear kind of progression, when you should kind of ramp up and then deload, then ramp up and then deload. But so many people either don't understand this, they're just following cookie cutter plans and just do whatever the plan tells me to do. I'm just going to follow like a robot. No, you have to use some common sense, folks. If you're feeling tired or if you're sick, take some deload, take a rest day. You might need to take more additional sleep. And then clean up your nutrition, right? Body comp. So many people ignore their body composition. They think, oh, I'm just average. I'm average weight. Because if you're in America, 74% of Americans are overweight, right? Just because 74% are overweight doesn't mean it's healthy, right? This doesn't mean it has to be normal. You could actually get to a leaner weight. You could actually be leaner and get healthier. You don't have to be extremely thin, right? You don't have to be super skinny, but you can get to a healthier, leaner weight. And you'll be able to enjoy the sport for longer, because you're not putting more impact stress. A lot of people, either they know this or want to ignore this, but when you're overweight, that puts more stress on your body. Even if you're just 10 pounds overweight, that it's equivalent to having 40 pounds of impact stress every time your leg hits the ground. So now you're going to have more risk of like knee arthritis or your breakdown in your joints, because you're just carrying more excessive weight on your body. That's stressing out your body. So just getting to a leaner weight will make it easier to enjoy running, reduce joint load and inflammation, right? Also with nutrition, right? Some people are, oh, I'm just going to run it off. I'm just going to eat whatever I want. But what you eat does matter. When you're younger, you could get away with it because you have a faster metabolism. But as you get older, your metabolism slows down. You start to gain weight. Eating all those cheeseburgers, pizzas, candy bars, etc. Not saying you can never have those things, but when you have them in excess, way too much of these fast food things, convenience foods, you cause more inflammation in the body, and that could actually contribute to pain as well. So eating healthier, cleaning up your diet, not having so much junk food, right, will help you get to a leaner weight, but also will help you enjoy running and go into longevity. So you're not even having to deal with things like heart disease or diabetes, all these risk factors from being excessively overweight or obese and having eating too much junk foods, right? So clean up the diet, get to a healthier body comp, right? And I look at this like these main pillars, the things that are interconnected to making you a healthy runner, right? Exercise. And so in exercise, you got obviously running, strength, mobility, but then you got sleep, you got your diet, and these things intersect to make you healthier. So you could be a healthy runner, an athletic runner, enjoy running for life, right? And you could do things like deep squatting, which represents good mobility in the hip and knees and ankles, right? So many folks can't even do a deep squat, yet they're like, oh, I'm just going to take my body to go run for a marathon, but they don't even have enough mobility in the body to handle the demands of running, right? So make sure your body is kind of well lubricated. You do the mobility, do the strength work, and running's going to feel a lot easier. It doesn't have to be a painful sport. So what happens after applying the athletic runner approach? So significant reduction of recurring overuse injuries, right? Improved durability, energy level, consistency. Just I've noticed this in myself as a runner, so someone who's dealt with persistent knee pain, but also with my clients. Like one of my runners in her 60s, she went to different doctors, even tried traditional PT, right? They just gave her some general rehab exercise. Her doctor wanted to give her like injections, cortisone injection, was even considering getting knee replacement surgery and told her to stop running altogether. But she came to me because she's like, hey, there's a different approach, and I take this holistic approach. So she's in her 60s. I got her to, follow this athletic runner approach. Saw significant reduction in her knee pain. Her limp went away. She was able to get out of that constant knee pain and went on to run the New York City Marathon pain-free, right? She regained the confidence in her body. Again, she didn't just do the exercise. She did the nutrition, got herself to a healthier body count, but looked at her posture, improved her lifestyle, got enough sleep, right? All these things mattered, and she was able to avoid knee surgery. And again, run the marathon, right? And now she's able to continue to run without fear of getting hurt again. She knows how to prevent the injuries, know how to do the mobility work, being consistent with the strength work. And so this can be true for you as well if you take this holistic approach to being a healthier athletic runner. So I currently have 2 spots open to work with me one-to-one to help you run for life without getting hurt. And if you're curious, there's a link to apply in the description. First come, first serve. So the key lessons to run for life without injuries. Running for longevity isn't about running more. It's about training like an athlete when you prioritize recovery, strength, mobility, sleep, nutrition, and smart programming, like the 3 runs per week. You will reduce injuries, improve performance, and can continue running pain-free well into your 60s and beyond.